I don't know whether to touch on the fact that the first time you said Homer's Odyssey, I thought you were making a Simpsons reference and then felt like a fucking idiot, or whether I want to comment on the genius of the comparison to the sirens from Homer, like proper Homer's Odyssey.
It's brave of you to admit.
Hey, you know, it's for the lols.
Broadcasting live from inside the power band, this is The Blah. In this episode, everybody dies. And in this movie, almost everybody dies. Because we're going to be talking about the 1979 epic, classic masterpiece, Apocalypse Now, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Martin Sheen, a portly Marlon Brando, and many other fine, fine actors that we're going to be getting into in the next hour or so. Joining me, as always, the infamous prototrope, Jar Higo.
Good evening, everyone.
Nice. And, of course, the elusive, ever-elusive algorithm.
Good evening. I'll go with the teetotaling that you introduced, Ben.
Good evening.
Indubitably.
Yes, good evening. Yes, we've got a wonderful film to talk about this evening.
Oh, quite.
It's called Apocalypse Now. So, where do we want to fly to first, guys?
Where do we want to fly to? Oh, let's talk about what version we watched, because it's almost like Blade Runner-esque in the number of versions there are.
Well, it is. I mean, the thing about it is that I specifically remember Chad saying, watch the theatrical version, and that's what I watched. And then when I texted this morning, he's like, oh yeah, I'm watching the Redux version. And then later he's like, oh, I just got out of the final cut in the theater. I was like, what? Wait.
What? Well, I still stand by the theatrical is probably the best place to revisit it.
Definitely.
What did you end up doing, Higgs?
The original theatrical version, yes.
Nice.
Have either of you seen either of the other cuts?
I think at some point along the line I saw the Redux version, but I can't be sure.
Don't recall.
Yeah, I think maybe previous to this recent watching, I might have watched that version, but I don't exactly remember.
Yeah.
It was a while ago.
Yeah. When did the Redux come out? Jimmy, get on that.
I believe it was 2001.
2001.
Oh, wow. Jimmy's gotten proper.
That wasn't Jimmy, baby.
We didn't need that schmuck. I had that information in my head.
Oh, wow.
We don't need that fucking Jimmy, dude. I got that shit right here on lock.
2001.
My answer to the question, Chad, I did as you asked, and I watched the theatrical version. The thing about this movie, this is so irritating. This movie was in every queue on every streaming service I had, off and on, for the last literally 3 years. Prime, Netflix, Hulu. And now that we're actually doing this movie and I need to watch it, because, of course, before I didn't watch it, it's not on any of those streaming services. So I Google Play had gifted me with a 99-cent rental, and I was fancied by that. So I took the rental and I watched it. I had 48 hours. I watched it 1.5 times, and then strangely enough, in my DVD collection, I found a copy of Apocalypse Now Redux, which I know is absolutely not mine. And so I was able to watch...
Maybe you gave it to somebody for their birthday and then took it back off them 3 days later.
Yeah, I think that's probably what happened.
Hey, can I borrow that movie? I'll get it right back to you. Just
don't spoil that story, because
You've told that story.
Did I tell that story on the air already?
You've told it twice on the air already. It's fantastic every time.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to save it again for when we actually do that film. I'm not going to reveal which film it is. So at any rate, yeah, that very well may have happened. I don't know. But I found the copy of Redux. I did watch some of it. I did watch the scene where with the bunnies, and then the scene with the French Plantation, which was interesting, and I want to talk about that for a minute at some point.
Yeah, totally. So that's the only major real difference, is those two scenes, yeah.
Well, that's what you said, and I did not see the final cut yet.
Yeah, cool. No, I found a pretty concise kind of a blog post that someone put up on a website that goes through the runtime and talks about the differences. I'll put that in the show notes. But the major difference, there's three differences. There's three key differences, two of which are major, one of which is super minor. So the super minor one is when there's the napalm in the morning surfing on the beach scene with Kilgore. At the end of that scene, they steal Kilgore's surfboard, and it's kind of funny, and it's like a 1 minute scene.
Okay. Interesting.
And then, the Playboy Bunny scene, which after the Playboy Bunnies dance around and have a dude hanging off the helicopter, it goes to later on in the movie. I don't know if it's immediately following. They find a downed helicopter, and a group of soldiers are like keeping the Playboy Bunnies in this helicopter for the safety reasons, and the gang from the film trade fuel to hang out with and like try and sleep with these bunnies, and it's a really weird, surreal, and uninteresting scene. And then, yeah, as you said, the French Plantation dreamy sequency thing, which is like a half an hour long in the Redux, which evidently is lifted from the book Heart of Darkness, which I haven't read, but it's a key part of the book, so I guess that's why they kept it in the film. And they also kept that one in the final cut that I saw.
Right. Are you sure you got your chronology right about the whole thing with the downed helicopter and the bunnies? Because my recollection is that they go visit the bunnies, they sleep with them, because you can see the bunny helicopter. He's in there with her. And then later, when they're going up the river, they find the downed helicopter.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like I'm doing that one from memory / reading that blog post. So if you watched it yesterday, then you would know better than I.
Well, actually today, but yeah. Right on. It doesn't matter.
It's not super important because, like, the real key difference between the three versions is the French Plantation scene.
Okay. Is that in the final cut?
Yeah, they keep the surfboard stealing, and they keep the a version of the French Plantation that's edited down to about 10 minutes instead of 25, which is nice. And it still is kind of clunky. It's still rather clunky.
I didn't think it was clunky. Should we talk about this now? The French Plantation scene, is that okay?
Yeah, I think it would be worth talking about it now because it's just kind of it is a scene out of time, literally, in the film. It'd be worth recapping it quickly for Ben's sake if you hadn't seen it or don't remember it, Benny. Would you want to do a quick recap, Kev?
I did watch the scene apart from the movie because I knew you would insist on talking about it.
Yeah, no, good. I don't really want to spend a ton of time on it. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it, but
please.
I think that's the first time in the show that I've died by like vicious murder. I've been bludgeoned to death by Ben.
Assassinated by Jarhiko.
Indeed you have, my friend.
Yeah, I like that.
Sorry, that was a little heavy-handed, Chad. I didn't mean to.
No, I like it. That's fucking great.
You know what, Ben? It was the delivery was factually accurate.
It was totally, yeah, for sure.
The tone was where you bludgeoned him.
I think it's fantastic that I'm the first murder death kill on the show.
Hey, somebody's got to get beat on every episode, Ben, and this time it just happens to be Chad. I mean, it's whatever.
We're very early in the show, so.
Hey, man, it's never too early to die. Right, guys?
That's right.
It.
That's the new motto of the show.
This is also the new Bond movie.
It's never. Are you serious?
No, but it sounds like a Bond movie. It's never too early to die.
That's right. Yeah, it sounds like the new motto for our show. It's never too early to die.
So the challenge here, Kev, is can you recap this plantation scene in haiku form? You only have 30 odd syllables. You have
30 odd syllables and 10 seconds. No, I can't, but I can do it in English pretty decently because I watched it today. Do I need to recap it? Ben's seen it.
For the audience's sake.
For the audience.
If we can do it super concisely, it would probably be a good thing.
For the non-super nerds who haven't watched the Redux version.
Okay, audience. Now this is Mulverine talking directly to you. Here's what happened. As the boat's going down the river, they see a lot of smoke. So they pull over. I think they hear some sounds of gunfire possibly as well. And there's all this strange yelling happening. And Chef recognizes it as French because he's from Louisiana. he starts communicating back with these people, and then he communicates with the members of the boat and party. Then all of these French people appear, and Clean has just died. This is the scene right after Clean bites it, and they take them in, and they do a ceremony for Clean, and they bury him on the plantation. It's a French rubber plantation. The meat of the scene is basically around a large dinner table in this French plantation. And, the sort of the quote-unquote regular soldiers like Lance and Chef are sitting with some of the...
They're at the kids' table.
Yeah, sort of at the kids' table, kind of. And then Willard is sitting with the head of the family and the main part of the family at the big table. And they have a very interesting conversation. And then pretty much everybody gets up and leaves, and except the wife, or one of the wives, who has lost her husband. And then she ends up hanging out with Willard, and they end up having cognac together and then smoking opium. And then that's pretty much the scene right there. And we're going to, I guess, dissect it here a little bit right now, right?
Yeah, it cuts from the opening smoke scene, and then it cuts from Willard, about to sleep with the lady, to another smoky, foggy scene. So you can see how clearly they cut it, how easy it was for it to be cut out of the original cut of the film.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just am not a huge fan of anything other than the theatrical cut, which we can get to a little bit later on, I guess. But I get that it's meant to talk about the greater theme of the movie and tie everything together, and it was a critical part of the book, evidently, but it didn't really work for me. It kind of really pulled me out of the previous vignettes. The movie was like a series of vignettes for me. It was almost like a string of pearls, where it was like a lot of short. It was like a series of short films that all tied together in a way because of how psychedelic and different a lot of the scenes were. And so in that sense, it kind of is psychedelic and weird, but in another sense, it was so out of place, that probably intentionally out of place, that it just didn't work for me.
Yeah. It also was kind of irrelevant to the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
And it was an unnecessary stop for the boat, I think.
Yeah.
Every other time the boat stops, it's something that moves the movie forward. That particular one was just sort of I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, but it's kind of an aside.
Yeah. Yeah, evidently it was supposed to be a dream sequence as well. It was, the people in the plantation were actually supposed to all be dead, and it was supposed to be sort of a dream sequence of sorts, and that's why the fog in and fog out happened. So I don't, we'll chew up a bunch of showtime talking about a scene that I don't particularly like anyways, but I just find it odd for a variety of reasons, especially I think the fact that it was supposed to not even be real, which is kind of an odd thing to do.
Well, then we don't have to spend a lot of time talking about it. I mean, here's what I'll say. I think if it was shot as a dream sequence, that would have been even dumber. That's my first thought. I originally thought that... I think it's easy to say that it's out of place because the setting is so out of place. Like a plantation in Vietnam, everything we've ever seen about Vietnam, it's like wet dudes in army BDUs in the jungle.
Forrest Gump, and it's raining upside down.
Yeah, they're about to go insane. Or they're already insane from killing people. I think that in that sense, I think it's sort of jarring because we're so used to seeing dudes in green in Vietnam movies blowing shit up and all that. But at the same time, they encounter so much completely weird shit, and up to and including the end of the film. And Lance, even drops acid at one point during all of that utter chaos. So the French plantation scene, I don't know. I thought it was cool. I saw what he was trying to do by showing how, the French had been there. And, I really liked what the guy was saying about how, we lost this war, we lost that war. He goes, but this plantation, this is mine. This has been in my family. This we are not giving up.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was kind of it's kind of it says a lot about the point of war and holding on to things that you shouldn't hold on to, and all kinds of things like that. And just the futility of the Americans being in Vietnam. And then like the guy next to Willard at one point, he kind of flips out and he's like, you have all this and all these guns and all these politicians and you could just like make shit happen here. And why don't you do that? And he's like all upset about it. And he gets up and leaves. And it's like, it doesn't really work that way, man. Like, and this is after the guys told him that the Viet Cong were invented by American politicians,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
or the
interesting.
CIA or whatever.
It's an interesting point because it's pretty clear now after we lost Vietnam and we lost in Iraq and we lost in Afghanistan that it's the most stubborn group that wins. Like we tend to not have the political will or the will of the people to continue these things for decades at a time, and we lose because of it. And so the French guy was basically saying that, he's just like, we lost everything, but we're not going to lose this. Like it's the most stubborn person, the most stubborn group that'll eventually end up winning.
The point is that he was, to have that guy talking about, the French perspective, they were there, they did something similar. And, the whole futility of Vietnam and the futility of war in general, like really comes through in that scene. And I really liked it. I thought it was good, actually. What I didn't like about that scene was what happened next with the widow. Like she was like, oh, let's drink some cognac. And I was like, okay, I can get down with this. This is cool. But then there was some really awfully cheesy music playing. And I was like, that music needs to go and this scene would be fine. Then when they're on the bed smoking opium, I was like, this is now like, yeah, no, just no. That was just dumb. And then she takes her clothes off and like, they have opium sex. I was like, this is just too weird. No, this doesn't need to be here. I think everything up until that was fine. So that's my breakdown of that scene. Like I thought it was good. I definitely appreciate what he was trying to do, but at the same time, like I've watched the theatrical version many times and it didn't alter the film for me in such a way that I was like, oh my God, finally, like something like it can just stay out of the movie and that's fine.
Yeah. I like it as like a deleted scene DVD extra as opposed to being in the film.
There you go. Deleted scenes are deleted for a reason, folks.
There you go.
I'm trying to remember the insert of that in the Redux, and it's I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. I think it's fine for a deleted scene on a DVD, but I don't think it needs to be in the movie. I think it kind of
fair enough.
It pulls me out of the movie for reasons that I'll get into at some point during the podcast. I'm sure of what the movie is to me and what it's about to me. What it means to me, and that kind of the little history lesson and all that stuff kind of pulls me right the fuck out of it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah.
So we can get into that later, but let's press on. Let's get out of this trap.
We could talk about the scope now if you wanted to, in terms of the over like an early overall take,
the broad take on the movie.
Yeah, I think it'd be an interesting do the broad take, and then we can dig into
sure some
of the other stuff.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So, I mean, Kev, you'll probably agree with this, and Chad, maybe even you too. There was a bevy of Vietnam movies when we were younger that were like everybody saw them. There was Platoon and Hamburger Hill and just all these
Full Metal Jacket,
all these great Full Metal Jacket. Yep, all these great Vietnam movies. Apocalypse Now is like a different animal. I almost don't think of Apocalypse Now as a Vietnam movie. I mean, it could take place in, the Vietnam of Apocalypse Now might as well be like Middle Earth or something. You know what I mean? It almost has it feels like Homer's Odyssey to me or something along those lines,
Like the guy could be going up the Colorado River to kill somebody. It could be anywhere.
Yeah.
It could be anywhere. Yeah. And the Vietnam of Apocalypse Now is this sort of dreamy, trippy space that the story takes place in, and the travel, the river trip is a huge part of it, right? I mean, being in the PT boat going up the river. So that's sort of my take on the movie. And, I guess I'll get into it right here. Whereas the thing about the plantation scene and the guy going on with the little historical yarn about, everything with Vietnam, that kind of takes it, that kills that for me. You know what I mean?
That's a good point.
Whereas otherwise you can pretty much completely just put all of that aside and just sort of, it's just part of the backdrop of the story. It's just part of the flavor. It's just the set and setting. It's the look of the film more so than it's a political statement about, Vietnam. It's just more about war in general, and it's so that's I guess that's where I stand with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that, because it makes perfect sense when viewed against the Heart of Darkness novel, which takes place in Africa along a riverboat journey in Africa, evidently. I don't think I've read the book. I mean, maybe in school or something, but yeah, I mean, it's all about the journey of the characters, and the setting is the setting. So I think that's a really, it's really clearly meant to be a storytelling vehicle. The war is meant to be a storytelling vehicle as opposed to the main point. I think that's a great point for sure. I didn't think about it at the time, but now it's the way that you describe it makes perfect sense to me.
No, that's probably the best point, is that exactly that. This could be anywhere. The story would work. And Vietnam is the backdrop. And I mean, he originally wanted to shoot it in Vietnam in 1970 when the war was still going on. And he was like, they knew there was no way they were going to let them do that.
I just find it crazy how soon after the war they filmed this. Like, that's just mind blowing.
I know. But George Lucas was supposed to be the one that was going to shoot it originally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I don't know, I just guess it kind of hung around for 2 years, and then like Lucas got on to starting Star Wars, and then, something else happened, and then Coppola finally was like, okay, I'll do it, and it's like, by then the war was over. But yeah, I mean, it's just what Ben said. It's the backdrop, Being it that it is the backdrop, I do believe that it does show how, I think factually and accurately, how completely weird it was. And from the sense of, I always get the impression that, not everybody wanted to be there. Not everybody understood why they were there. And that's where a lot of like the craziness came from, and like the crazy behavior came from. And it was just such a awful place. It's like when you're fighting in Europe, like in World War II, it's like you're like fighting in North America. It's like the landscape is the same. The climate is the same. You know what I mean? It's like winter and summer and spring and fall. It's like,
sure,
Vietnam, it's like the rainy season, and then there's the not rainy season, and it's hot, and it's like gross, and like,
yeah, and your enemy is wearing a uniform. It's not just like yet another person that looks like a farmer.
Right. Dudes in rags and coolies with AK-47s, it's like, I don't know.
Proper guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, proper guerrilla warfare. Exactly, man. So like nobody really wanted to be there. So I feel like the film showcases that sort of like in some parts like utter hopelessness and pointlessness of that war, and just that craziness, man. Like just Kilgore with the surfing and the fucking stakes and shit, and like they didn't originally have the narration in there. They added it later, but like, there's at that point, the narration, Martin Sheen's narration says like he choppered in the T-bones and the beer, and the more he tried to make it like home, the more everybody missed it, and it just, you could feel that coming through in that scene, like just that like desperation of like, hey, we're just rock and rollers, we're gonna have steaks tonight. It's just like, it's so fake, it's not like being at home. Ditto with the surfing, it was so crazy. So I don't know, like my overall impression is that it did a decent job of showcasing the craziness of the war in the backdrop of this, mission of murder, to go murder somebody that's quote unquote gone insane.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I thought it added a lot to the story. Like, again, I haven't read the book, but I think it was quite genius to layer the Vietnam War, considering how current it was, and the like frustrations of the public with the war, into the old school Heart of Darkness style story. Like, I think it to the thing that I never stopped talking about, it is probably very much so elevated the material. Like it took something that was older school, and then breathed new life into it because of how relevant it was at the time.
Right. I'm with that.
I think I interrupted you there, Ben. Were you going to chime in with something?
No, I just wanted to clarify really quick that, I don't want to take away, I don't want to take anything away that the movie got right about the Vietnam War. And,
No.
I don't want to take that away from anybody's interpretation, of the movie. I'm just talking about what my interpretation of it is, or the way that it works for me. So that's all. I just wanted to clarify that.
I agree. I do think that Kev's follow-up to when you said that initial point was the right way to describe it, where like your point about it being the underlying film, like it really is the point of the movie, and the other things are layers on top, like the setting of the Vietnam War is a layer on top. So I really do feel like your interpretation gets at the core of it for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, as Kev said, it does seem to get a lot right about the massive confusion centered around, what was going on over there, that everybody seemed to be experiencing,
I can't speak at all about war in general, and I wouldn't dare kind of try and say what it's like. But I ran into a guy who was essentially Captain Willard when I was in Port-au-Prince. He was a non-vet who had really seen some shit, and I only know that because we'd sit around drinking rum after a hard day's work, and he would talk about it, and he was quite open about it and told some stories that were like straight out of the movie. He was telling me a story once about like going to get a pound of weed from a depot and like pulling up in a PT boat, and the place just blew up, and he jumped into like a fucking Indiana Jones style transportation train cart that was just getting shot to shit, and like he was in this train cart with a dude and a pound of weed, and the place was blowing up. You know what I mean? Like, just it sounded exactly like these movies, or it sounded exactly like the vignettes in Apocalypse Now, and it really stuck with me.
Yeah,
how psychedelic the actual war was, in a way, based on the events, that the surreal events that happened to these guys that were over there. And so I think that's a big part of my appreciation for layering that into the Heart of Darkness story.
Yeah,
because like I haven't really touched on what the movie meant to me. Like, I was a traditional teenage jackass who obviously was fascinated by action movies and war movies for the obvious reasons of just playing guns and playing war and all that dumb stuff you do as a boy.
Sure.
And so for me, like, being a little bit younger than you guys, Apocalypse Now was the Vietnam War movie for me. I don't think I saw any of the other contemporary war movies until a little bit later, when I was a little bit more mature. So it's kind of interesting in a way that like my first exposure to the Vietnam War was through the psychedelic lens of Apocalypse Now, because it's such an out there film.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't really have a lot to say about it in the sense of like what that meant to me, but I definitely have a real, like, it has a real special place for me because it was the first exposure to the Vietnam War for me as a kid. So I kind of feel like with most things, when you're introduced to a new subject, it tends to be the first thing that you see that sticks around the most. Yeah,
I mean, just for like a little personal background, like when I was a little shit running around in the woods with toy guns playing war, like we were our playing war was playing Vietnam.
Yeah, right.
Same here. Same. Always.
Like that was like the nearest conflict to what was going on. All the military surplus gear that we were getting, like the camo gear and stuff we were wearing was like, Vietnam era stuff. All the toy guns that we had were like, M16s and, and so like all that stuff, like there was like a backdrop, of like the Vietnam War through all that, like, youthful,
always
running around in the woods, playing war kind of stuff.
Definitely. That and Commando and Predator.
Yeah.
And Rambo. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget Rambo, First Blood Part 2.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. First Blood, which is kind of that series is sort of based around Vietnam as well, because John Rambo is a Vietnam vet.
It's 100% based around Vietnam, and I would even go so far as to say is the first film of the series is like, I mean, it's great. That's a great film. Like, It's really good. Like when you get into Rambo, we're getting into more like 80s action movie territory. But the first one is very, very much like a thinking, feeling movie, like a film about the price of war and all of that. And I'm on a digression about First Blood that I shouldn't be, so I'll stop right there. Anyway.
No, that's okay. I mean, but just for the folks that, out there listening, that's sort of, so you get what I'm saying, Kev, about all of that. And like,
oh my God. Yeah.
I don't know. There was like something about, I don't think I was really thinking about the morality or the implications of the war or anything, but there was something about the aesthetic of all that stuff.
Definitely.
That was appealing to us when we were kids, and like even the music that's associated with those movies so often, like Doors and like Creedence Clearwater Revival, stuff like that. Like
Creedence, yeah, a bit of Rolling Stones.
Yeah, Stones, like all that kind of stuff, like just like really just connected in an interesting way.
No doubt. That was, I mean, that ended up being like a huge part of my music listening in high school was like all of that 60s music, the Doors, Creedence, especially those two.
Same.
Because of, I guess it was because of stuff like that. But yeah, same for us. Like we were always playing war in the woods, and it was sort of Vietnam centric, I guess. Like I said, plus Commando, plus Predator, whatever. but yeah.
I went to I got lucky yesterday because the final cut was showing at a local kind of indie movie theater, and it was only showing for one night, and it turns out it was like a film critic hosting it, and so this film critic got up and was like, okay, we're going to watch the movie and then we're going to talk about it, and I've got a sound guy here that did the sound on Black Hawk Down and a couple other movies, and we'll talk about it after. And I was like, oh, okay, cool.
What? This was in Perth?
Yeah, it was super cool. And
oh wow, awesome.
Wow, that is super cool.
Super random. And like we watched the film, and then and it was fantastic because they remastered the print. They did a 4K scan of a print and remastered the print, so it was like really clear visually on a theater screen. And then they remastered the sound to be Dolby Atmos, and so like being able to see the whole thing in like a full theater style surround was just mind blowing. And
wow.
The host was talking before the movie about how the writer, I forget his name, went to university with Jim Morrison and George Lucas.
Correct.
And,
yes, that's correct.
And like he wrote in the screenplay, he wrote that the Doors music was going to be where it was, and he wrote that the Valkyries song was going to be where it was with Kilgore. And he was able to like talk to Jim Morrison into like putting the music in the movie and stuff. So I thought that was kind of an interesting tidbit of history because for me, the Doors sequence, like the end song, is just like iconic in this movie and really kind of sets it apart.
It's iconic, period. Yeah. Well, let me just add a little bit to that. One little thing. Coppola knew all of the Doors because they all went to film school with him at UCLA, not just Morrison. And they let him have the master recordings to use in that film.
Yeah, right.
Which is huge. And, everything else you said is, yeah, exactly right. Like, it's the perfect song.
Yeah, I'm just regurgitating what this guy said, so I don't know what's what. But yeah, it's just it's an interesting coincidence or whatever that they all kind of hung out together as contemporaries.
Absolutely. I actually read a bunch of stuff on a site called Mental Floss, and we're going to throw that in the show notes for anybody that wants to read that entire list. There were some really good little nuggets in there about the film. So, I think my personal feeling about I'm a huge Doors fan, so playing the end at the beginning of this song, of the film, and then later on is just great. I thought it was amazing, and then I just thought the score was great too. Like it wasn't anything insanely memorable, but it was very moody, and it really helped cast that pale mood of the film, that sallow, somber mood of the film quite well. And it goes to show that it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes simplicity is simply the best thing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the kind of minimal synth driven score music. I thought it was really cool. I caught myself at times listening to it, and it was reminding me of the music from Hyperlight Drifter, which is just a great video game soundtrack. The music is all like very minimal, kind of emotional synth stuff, you know. So I was enjoying that aspect, and yeah, of course, I mean, you know, just it's got all that stuff. The Doors starting off at the end. It's really that song really captivates, or really it captures the film, I think. And yeah, just all the other stuff, seeing super young Lawrence Fishburne dancing to you know,
oh my God, right?
Satisfaction by the Stones, and you know,
Totally.
the Playboy dancers are dancing to Susie Q by Creedence, and you know, yeah, all the score music and the popular music they included in the film were just really superb.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, superb. Good word.
The dude last night, the sound guy, was talking about how, in his view, and maybe most of, you know, the people in the know's view, this was the movie that gave birth to the sound designer as a role. So like,
Wow.
the work on this was so groundbreaking that it like gave birth to the need for a sound designer, and the way that the sound designer, who I guess was named Walter Murch, who the way he wove it all together was just like really groundbreaking and really changed the industry in the sound department, which I thought was quite fascinating. It makes sense because it's just fucking fantastic sound.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does sound great.
And in terms of the fantastic sound, I think this is a great transition because there's no better place to experience that than in the first few minutes with the helicopter kind of being synthed out and the end playing and kind of the double exposure of like helicopters with Captain Willard lying on the bed with the fan and the chopper noises and stuff. Like, it's just a masterpiece of an opening scene.
I agree. So I did catch that right, Chad, right? Like in the beginning, once he accepts the mission and that synth music is playing in the transition, and then it fades into the chopper sound, right?
Yeah, it's like distorted choppers throughout that then turn into a ceiling fan that then kind of like fade into City Sounds of Saigon kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, it was really, really well done.
Yeah, and there's all this sort of morphing going on with the sound at the same time, Chad. Like you said, there's like a bunch of double exposure stuff going on.
Yeah,
in the film, it definitely is great.
But I would love to touch on the cast if we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, let's go.
I'm gonna jump right in then.
Do it.
Martin Sheen, we all know him, we all love him. He had been asked and passed on this film, but he got Harvey Keitel to play this part, and then he fired him 6 weeks into it.
Yeah, it's wild.
He had also asked Steve McQueen, who turned it down. He didn't want to shoot in the jungle. He asked Nicholson. He asked a bunch of different people to do this movie. Al Pacino. They either couldn't do it or turned it down. And then he went back to Marty and asked him to do it, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine anyone else doing it.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I know that Martin Sheen's own personal sort of situation with alcohol kind of mirrored what was happening with Willard. So
sure,
yeah,
clearly he was the right choice for the to play the character.
And I totally imagine Keitel's performance being very similar to Dennis Hopper at the end, being like way too energetic.
Yeah, I mean, geez, I hadn't even thought about that. You're probably right. I mean, this movie has, it's like a who's who of like America's great actors in it. We got a 17-year-old Larry Fish. We got, Albert Hall, who played the chief of the boat,
he was amazing.
So good, man. He was amazing. And he's not somebody that went on to do, he didn't become like a super famous person afterward, but he definitely did a lot of great stuff. He was in Malcolm X with Denzel, and he did a lot of great stuff, but he was just phenomenal in that movie. I really, really liked him. He really he was kind of the mom of the whole group throughout the whole film. And it really came through. He was in control. Like I actually had of the few notes I have. I love how Willard was always like, "You're not authorized to make that stop. You're not authorized to go there. My mission supersedes this." And he was always like, "Yeah, no, we're stopping.
I don't give a shit, bro."
Or no, we're going there. Yeah, exactly. You know,
yeah, it was a great the fact that the boat's like a little family. I thought was really apt. It really worked.
It was cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it was. It really did.
Willard even says as much in one of his little monologues there, one of the voiceovers.
Yeah,
something along the lines of it was my mission, but the chief made it clear that it's his boat.
Mm-mm.
Definitely.
Yeah,
and the way he died at the end is like the stupid spear, and he just goes, "A spear," and then he bites it like.
Yeah, but then he tries to freaking impale Willard, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah, it's like just have the indication of how far south things had gone by that point.
That's it.
Oh yes, totally.
And I guess it goes without saying that really one of the juggernauts of the movie is Brando. And we don't really need to get into it, in my opinion. We don't really need to get into the production challenges with Brando, but by God, man, that guy is a fucking powerhouse in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay. Let me just continue.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm not going to comment on that right now. I may not comment on that at all. I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, now I need to know.
Okay, well, now I'm going to say it. I mean, he shows up unprepared. He's 300 pounds. He's no idea what he's going to do, what he wants to do. He basically did the movie for a paycheck, and it shows. I think it was a combination of his greatness and Coppola's skill with filming that ended up making him look great, For sure. Yeah, by all means. I'm not saying he's a fucking genius, but what they were able to do with the shit show of the film, it's no different than the rest of the film. The rest of the film was a shit show production-wise, so it's not to give plaudits to Brando for being a fat, lazy piece of shit, but they made magic happen for sure. Yeah, exactly.
Look, what there is of Brando in the film, it definitely makes an impression, it definitely,
no doubt.
Like everyone said, it could have a lot to do with how, it could have a lot to do with the filmmaking. I think it does have a lot to do with the filmmaking, but, when Brando shows up in the film, he definitely makes an impression, I thought.
No doubt. I mean, he's who he is, man, So there you have it, Brando. Who else?
Well, we can't get through this without talking about Robert Duvall.
I was just gonna say we got to talk about Kilgore, man.
that's my favorite part of the film. That whole sequence is just terrific.
Well, I wasn't gonna skip. Him, man. I'm getting there. I was gonna go to the guy, and I know his name, and now of course I can't remember it to save my life. The guy that plays Chef is Frederick Forrest, and he ended up being in a bunch of other stuff later. Have you guys ever seen the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas?
So good.
Yeah.
So good. And he plays the guy that runs the Army surplus store in that film.
Yeah, right.
Oh, shit.
And he's equally kind of brings that great crazy to that part too. But man, he is just Willard says it in the beginning, the guy is wound too tight for Vietnam, probably wound too tight for New Orleans. And he is. He's a guy is wound so tight. He's so wound so tight, you can't even believe it when Chief dies and he goes, "We'll go with you. We'll go with you in the boat. We'll take you there."
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe the guy was going. I figured he'd cut and run at the first opportunity. So
his freak out at that tiger scene I thought was masterful.
Yeah. Oh my God. Totally, man. Just great. Really great actor, man. Anyway, so he was really great. And then of course, we had Harrison Ford. This is interesting. That was shot before he shot Star Wars.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So he was super nervous too. He wasn't a big star yet. So he shot because this movie got shot before Star Wars. Then it got released after Star Wars.
Was that before or after American Graffiti though?
After American Graffiti.
After. Okay.
Correct. So Robert Duvall. So good.
So good.
I mean, all these guys, you know, a lot of these filmmakers, they reuse the same actors that they love. And Coppola is no different. And Duvall was in The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, and now he's in Apocalypse Now. I mean, it's no surprise. The guy's a monster, man. I mean, he's still making movies, and he's like 80-something now, and he's still amazing. And I know that this is one of your favorite parts, Ben. Why don't you talk about it a little bit?
Oh man. Well, I mean, you know, I think Robert Duvall does a great job as Kilgore, but man, what a role, right? I mean, just the amount of lines that guy gets to deliver, and just the charisma of that character. And, you know, like, I think Willard describes him as having that light, like, where you just know, like, he's going to be okay. Like, nothing's ever going to happen to this guy. You know, he's just fucking standing there on the beach, and there's like fucking shit blowing up like right next to him, and he's just like, he doesn't even flinch.
That's so fucking great.
Yeah.
He's, you know, and he's just like, he's this weird contradiction. Like he doesn't even want to help. And then when he finds out that Lance is a surfer, he's like, oh shit, okay, yeah, let's go. You know, and then like the whole thing is just based on the fact that he gets to go surf, or he gets to watch people surf.
Yeah.
So he just risks the lives of his entire, you know, of the entirety of his air cav unit. You know, he's that
Cavalier.
He's Cavalier. Yes. Thank you. He's that Cavalier, but yet he really seems to care about his men at the same time. So there's this kind of dichotomy going on there. You know, and he's just like this super charismatic person, but this kind of, you know, like a sort of monster of sorts, really. You know?
Yeah.
And just everything that goes on through that whole sequence is just amazing. You know, just all the film of all the helicopters flying in formation, and, you know, the whole Wagner thing, and, you know, the fucking napalm line, and the, you know, Charlie doesn't surf, you know, like everything is just like, it's 100% iconic. Everything that goes on through that whole sequence is just super iconic and quotable and you know, memorable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So memorable.
The whole thing is like this weird, like, it's like a slew of little vignettes, little things that happen to sort of like showcase what type of person Kilgore is, you know? Like there's like a part where they, you know, they've landed, and like there's like a I don't know if the guy's like VC or what, but I think he was like VC, but like there's a guy, and he's like holding his guts in with that bowl, and like the translator's like arguing with Kilgore, and Kilgore just like fucking shoves him. He's like, any guy that's brave enough to fucking hold his guts in with a bowl can drink from my canteen, you know?
Yeah, I know, totally.
But then he says anyone that's brave enough gets a drink from my canteen, and then fucking someone says, hey, isn't that Lance what's and stuff? He's like, oh, he just like gets up and walks off with the fucking canteen.
He just fucking bolts.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, he does. But I think it showed a good. It really that part was really key in showing that, you know, Kilgore, he has written his own rule book for what he does, and that's what he follows, and that's it. That's what he does. Right.
And he's like hyper idealistic, but also completely flaky.
Exactly. Sort of. Yeah. Well, it seems like everything he does has meaning, but it's his own, you know, he's got his own reason for doing everything in his own rule book, and that's what he follows, and that's what he does, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the iconic level of Kilgore in this movie really reminds me a lot of the gunnery sergeant from Full Metal Jacket, you know, in terms of just like between Kilgore and the basic training scream in your face gunnery sergeant from Full Metal Jacket, they're like some of the most iconic war roles ever.
Well, that's a great segue, Chad, because as luck would have it, Arlie Ermy, who played that drill instructor in Full Metal Jacket, was an actual Vietnam War veteran, and he has an uncredited role as a helicopter pilot in this film.
What?
Dude, I caught that last night for the first time. I saw his face. I was like, that's the dude. Holy shit.
That's the dude.
Yeah. That's fucking fantastic. Benny, did you ever catch that was the dude from Full Metal Jacket?
No, I never did.
Yeah, fair enough. It's easy to miss. I didn't even remember who he was. I was just like, I know that guy.
No, I want to. No, I want to see.
Yes, it's like a 2-second thing. That whole sequence, man, like, I love Robert Duvall, and like, he's just like, I don't know, he's the cornerstone of that part of the film. But just, I feel like that sequence, the Rite of the Valkyries or whatever it's called scene, is so, it's just mind-blowing, the amount of work that they put into that. There's no CG, it's all practical. All the helicopters are real military helicopters from the Philippines, and just like the shit that those guys fucking pulled off for that sequence. It is a mind-blowing sequence.
Yeah, it's insane. There's so many, like, just so much pyrotechnics and just,
buildings blowing up.
It's just like, I can't imagine the amount of coordination and, like, just that's it. Coordination, insane coordination that must have taken to like get that right,
Yeah.
I remember hearing something about the, I wish I should have, I'm only thinking about this now, but I wish I had researched it before the show. But there's some crazy story about when the jets swoop through and do and drop a napalm. And like, I know I feel like there was some kind of like timing issue there, like with the jets flying through and them timing that massive napalm explosion.
Yeah. That's quite a big explosion.
Yeah.
That's some serious pyro.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, I shouldn't have even mentioned it, but
is that from that documentary? Did you ever see that Heart of Darkness making of documentary or whatever back in the day?
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I always meant to watch it, and I never did. I've certainly read plenty about, the filming of the movie, but I never did get to watch Heart of Darkness.
It's been so long, but that's really worth watching.
I almost feel like have you ever seen Tropic Thunder?
Oh, for sure.
I almost feel like they spoofed that in Tropic Thunder, and that there was something, there's like some clip out there, somebody in that movie saying something about it, but I could be completely wrong. I don't remember.
No, you're probably right. Between that and Hot Shots, there's plenty of references to Apocalypse Now.
Yeah. Well, we'll send the audience on a wild goose chase for
for sure.
Good luck, gang.
Yeah, the land surfing stuff was so good, man. I love how, like you were saying, like they're sitting at the barbecue, eating steaks, and one of the soldiers is just like, "Oh yeah, no, one of those spots has really good 6-foot break, man." And that's the reason that they go in the first place, is to go and fucking surf. And
it's like breaking both ways. Like
the guys are out there surfing, and there's this like fucking mortars blowing up in the water between the surfers, and it's just fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, there's so much crazy shit that happens in that sequence, and it's like, it's serious, like guy gets his leg blown off, like that girl like comes running up to the chopper, and they're like, she's got a grenade, and like, fucking blows the whole thing up, and there's just all this carnage and shit happening. But like, you're right, there's something really comical about like, just Kilgore's obsession with the surfing. It's like he's talking to Lance at one point. He's like, "What do you think?" And Lance's like, "Well, it's really exciting, He's like, "No, the surf. See how it's breaking both ways?" Like,
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like, he sends his guys out there, and it's like there's fucking mortars fucking exploding in the water and shit behind him, trying to fucking drop in. Oh man, yeah, it's just insane.
But watching this movie now, after having seen every action movie and whatever war movie that has followed, so many of the movies are taking their cues from Apocalypse Now. Like, when they sit on their helmets to protect their balls, like, that kind of chatter between soldiers in a lot of the other movies you see comes straight from that type of scene, Like,
yeah,
it's wild how kind of formative this psychedelic war movie that isn't really about war is, even with soldiers that are in the real world. Like there's been like people say that soldiers fly around playing the Valkyries song. You know what I mean? It's really wild.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a beautiful movie. It's so well done, and it's just, how could you not be a soldier and not have some some moment that's going to remind you of that movie, or and for certain it does seem to be a template for it did seem to become a sort of template for war movies moving forward after that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just find revisiting a lot of these types of things, books and movies, as I get older. It's so fascinating to like rediscover the source material for a lot of things, like so often you'll rewatch something years later and pick stuff up that you never got the first time because you were young or whatever, but also you'll notice, be like, oh wow, yeah, this movie takes from that and that, like Martin Sheen coming out of the water with his face covered in mud at the end of the movie, like really reminds me a lot of Arnie mudding himself up in Predator, like it wouldn't surprise me at all if the inspiration for that was coming from Apocalypse Now, for example. And like even just like so many little things just get picked up by other creators and put in their films. And it's just such a fascinating thing to rewatch these movies from time to time.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about it when I saw this film originally. I don't know if I saw it in the 80s or if I saw it before Predator. But yeah, I mean, it's fairly obvious that, they borrowed from that in Predator. I can't think of many other movies that have done it. I'm sure there's plenty. Movies borrow from, well, everybody borrows from everybody. I mean, that's what art is. You see something and you go, oh, wow, but I could do this and it would be like this. That's what great art is all about. So, yeah, I honestly never put it together. I'm surprised that I didn't, and I think it's pretty cool, actually. I don't think that Predator is on the same level as Apocalypse Now.
No, clearly,
but Predator is a great movie in its own right, and it's definitely a sort of staple in the annals of science fiction films, and kind of war films too. Because it was really good and it had a lot of groundbreaking stuff in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just take that example at face, the Predator thing. I mean, that movie it clearly borrows a lot from Apocalypse Now. Like, it borrows a ton. Like just when the shit hits the fan in that movie, like when it's in the thick of it, and like the first couple guys have already died, and like it's like the Predator's on the hunt, and everybody sort of just goes into their own little, everybody just sort of goes rogue, as it were, like everybody has their own little, like, just the way that everybody, and I don't want to like go off on Predator here, but just to use it as an example, like, it seems like every character has their own weird little tick, like there's a dude that's like constantly shaving, and like, it's like that intensity and that sort of like surrealness of like, being in danger and in combat, like in the way that people deal with it. Like you definitely saw that in Apocalypse Now. Like, I don't know, I'm thinking like the bridge scene, like the PT boat where they pull up, I forget which bridge it is or whatever, but it's just before they finally get to Kurtz. And it's just like there's nobody in charge, like it's just fucking bedlam. And there's like, like one dude, like there's like a dude with an M60 and he's just fucking spraying bullets out into the jungle. They're trying to get like one guy and they're like, what the fuck are you doing? And he's like, oh, I got him. And like you can still hear the guy out there like, fuck you, GI, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he turns, he's shooting it up, and then he turns around because Martin Sheen says something. He turns around, he's like, "Oh, sorry, sir," blah 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 blah. And he's like, "Who's the commanding officer?" He's like, "Ain't you?"
Yeah, exactly.
So good.
And then the one dude comes out with like the mortar, with the fucking grenade launcher.
Roach.
He's got like fucking, like all the He's just like he just like listens and like looks for him and finds him and shoots him like there's just something like crazy, like whatever the fuck is going on in those guys' heads during that scene, or in that situation. Like I feel like, that same kind of that same kind of, I don't know, acting, I guess, and portrayal of things definitely showed up.
Yeah, they echo each other for sure.
Yeah, and in all kinds of war movies,
Yeah, I love that scene for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then at the very end, the dude's name is Roach. He comes out, turns the radio down, and thunk, shoots the grenade.
Yeah,
it kills the guy, and it's like that whole time, Lance is like kind of climbing up on top of the sandbags on acid with a puppy hanging out of his shirt.
Yeah.
and Martin Sheen's just like staring at the guy that's like getting ready to shoot the grenade, and the guy shoots the grenade, and as soon as he shoots the grenade and it blows up, Martin Sheen just goes, "Soldier, do you know who's in charge here?" And Roche just turns and looks at him and just says, yeah, and then walks off. And it's just like, it's so perfect. Like, I just love that scene. I think it's one of my favorite scenes in the film.
Yeah. That whole bridge scene is like a definite major runner up to the Kilgore, beach scene. Like that's yeah. It's right after where Chief decides to pull up and like patrol that boat.
Oh
and,
yeah,
like,
you're right.
Like,
yeah.
It's right after that whole thing. So yeah, Lance just got that dog, and that whole scene is just, it's so fucked up. Like,
that is so powerful, man. That scene. Oh man,
it's so fucked up. Like, it's super tense, and like,
Chef kills that scene too. Like, he's just like, it's fucking rice and it's fucking mangoes, and then all of a sudden Clean just freaks out and shoots him up with the 50 cal.
Yeah, I mean, I've missed it before, and I missed it on this run. But was there something that prompted Clean to start shooting, or was it just like a twitch? Did he just?
Yeah. The woman runs to the back of the boat, and it turns out she's running back to grab the puppy. But Clean kind of freaks out and panics that she's running back to grab a gun or something, and just lights the place up.
Right. Clean opens up, then everybody fucking opens up.
Yeah, and Lance jumps on the front, and he starts shooting them and screaming, and Willard is just kind of like head over his back of his head, kind of ducked down, because he doesn't want to stop at all. And then, yeah, I think like they're like, oh, she's not dead yet, and Chef rolls her over, and then the captain's like, oh, we're gonna take her to get medical treatment. And I love the powerful elements of Willard just shooting her, being like, I told you not to fucking stop, and then the next narration is like, they'll never look at me the same again. But I thought it was just such a perfect encapsulation of like, we shouldn't have done this. I'm going to fucking put an end to this, cold-blooded style, and let's fucking keep going here. We shouldn't have stopped. Like, it's such a raw scene.
Yeah, it's something really uncomfortable and just awful about that scene, and the way it's like you can smell it coming, like you can smell that coming, that whole awful unfolding scenario.
But I think you need it. I think you need a scene where the characters fuck up, because otherwise it's just a series of them being observers and everyone else fucking things up. Like, I think you need a scene where they make a mistake and it's like, fuck, that was heavy.
Yeah, sure. I'm not saying they should have omitted the scene because it was difficult to watch, but it was definitely difficult to watch, and sure, that really sort of solidifies Willard's character in a certain light. Like, you didn't necessarily, you knew he was cold, but you didn't see him be cold up until that point. And it was almost like he iced that girl for their benefit. Because. Like, I guess it was probably more for his benefit than anything, because he just wanted to get on with his mission. If they had to stop somewhere one more time or bring her back somewhere to take care of her, then it would have just, I don't know.
Well, it seemed like it was a practical thing, too, where I'm sure he was just like, she's shot to shit, she's going to fucking die, let's stop wasting time. And one of the things that jumped out at me in this most recent viewing is that when, in the opening scenes, I think he has his freak out drunk in the hotel room. He gets washed up and goes to have a meeting with the generals and Harrison Ford. And I think it's at that time that the narration is basically like, I've killed 6 people face to face. So he hasn't actually killed that much, generally speaking, compared to like a Rambo style film where it's just like expected that he's killed hundreds of people. And so I kind of feel like that was interesting in the sense that like he hasn't necessarily been a cold-blooded soldier, killer, crazy vet kind of dude, and I think it adds more weight to that scene where he's just kind of, I took it as him being practical, just being like, you guys are a bunch of fucking idiots, why are you shooting them, A, and why did we stop, B, let's get on with this,
right? And
being a bit more practical about it. But anyways, this might be digging a little too far into it.
Yeah, perhaps. I definitely took it as, portraying him as having a little bit of ice in his veins.
Yeah.
I mean, just even the way, like, in the narrations and the way that he talks about the stuff, it almost seems as if he's like quite detached, but I mean, clearly he's got like PTSD and he's like really fucked up, but in the way he deals with the killing is in this sort of detached,
manner,
cold way. Yeah.
I don't think that Willard's nature is cold. I think he's numb.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I think at the beginning of the film, he's numb. He's numb when he leaves his wife, signs up for another tour. So I don't think he's necessarily cold. I just think he's become numb to it all. And I don't know. I think that I don't know. If Kurt slipped into madness, maybe Willard is as well. Maybe not. He completes the mission and then he leaves. I mean, God knows what happens to him after that, but you know, and there is.
I got the impression that he skirts madness, really.
Yeah, I think he skirts madness as well. And you know, you read about Kurtz and what a outstanding person he was. Not just a soldier, but a man. You know, he was an outstanding man, and family man, and all of this sort of thing, and like. To be burdened with all that hatred, all that death, it's like, and to be that loving of a person, that kind of like sort of warm, normal, loving person, family man, whatever, like that's intense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really ever considered that, really. Well, I feel like it's also like developing him, like his character develops on the boat journey with the experiences he shares, the crazy experiences he shares with the crew, but also with the experiences that he's sharing with Kurtz via all of the materials he's reading that these other guys aren't reading. So I kind of feel like part of the riverboat journey is him becoming more Kurtz-like and more understanding of Kurtz's cold-bloodedness as well. So I kind of feel like that plays a part.
Yeah, that definitely does. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. The longer he's on the boat and the more that he's reading, the more it's like the more he's understanding what's going on with Kurtz, and at the same time, the more that's sort of penetrating him and becoming part, like integrating into his personality, so to speak.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's a major theme in the book. It makes sense. The further down the river they go, the more alike they are, and it leads to a climax kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, of course, so much so because by the final act, we realize that Kurtz seems to have an affinity for him.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the movie critic guy, we don't need to touch on the ending now necessarily, but the movie critic guy was saying that he felt that the theme was like love and hate, like the dichotomy of love and hate. Like even Dennis Hopper talks about the dichotomy in the end when he's babbling like a jackass. And he was saying that, like, in order for Willard to kill Kurtz, he needed to love him as well as have the hatred to kill him. And, like, I recognize that that's probably the theme overall, and it's probably also the theme in the book, but, like, I don't really give a shit, to be honest. I'd rather just take it as a piece of art, Like, I get frustrated sometimes when people jerk off about, like, the deeper meanings, even though I tend to be the person that jerks off about deeper meanings on this podcast. Like, sometimes it gets frustrating,
No, that makes sense, though. I mean, and I feel like that's sort of how it plays out, right? I mean, I feel like in the beginning, he has this revulsion towards Kurtz. And by the end, it's like he understands him so well that I think he kills him out of pity.
Yeah.
Like he wants to end his suffering.
Yeah, and even Kurtz, even in the narration, he says, like, he thinks that Kurtz wants him to give him an out as well.
Right, yeah. It's almost like a gift to Kurtz,
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth getting into this or not, but something that completely blew me away last night that I'd never noticed before was the scene where Willard is meeting with the general and the intelligence officer and Harrison Ford for the first time. So right in the beginning of the film, they're sitting around a dinner table, like talking about the stuff and playing the recordings, and the snail slithers it on the razor and all that kind of ad-lib stuff. And it's a well-shot scene and everything's good and whatever. And then at one point, the general, I'm not sure which of the two people it happens with first, but the general looks directly into the camera and starts talking about the order. So he's breaking the fourth wall. And then it cuts back to Willard, who's also looking in the camera. And so, like, instead of a normal scene where you're, like, watching a conversation happen, you're placed in the center of the conversation. And so you're almost like an object of the conversation. It really, like, it just rips you into the movie, like, sucks you in. And you're just like, oh, wow, this dude's looking right at me. And there's a few different scenes in the movie where a character is talking to Willard and look directly into your eyes as the viewer, and it really, like, is super powerful, and it's the only time I can think of a breaking of the fourth wall that I didn't think was a pile of shit. Like, I normally hate that, and I was really, like, taken by it in viewing it last night.
Yeah, I don't know if I took it as like a breaking of the fourth wall, although I guess technically that is. But I don't know. It also sort of like puts you in like the POV.
Yeah.
You know?
But it's almost like trying to make you not identify with Willard, but just like it puts you in his shoes for a minute, puts you in his skin. And then you go from being in his skin to an observer of him, and it's quite confusing. But in a really powerful way.
To me, breaking the fourth wall is like Deadpool. When you are literally speaking to the audience, then you are breaking fourth wall. That sort of thing is more, in my opinion, a way to do exactly what you said, which is draw the viewer into the POV of the main character, to put them in the action. I mean, we talk about, the fight scenes that we don't like when they're all up close. It's designed to pull you into the fight, so you think you're in the fight, and it just doesn't work. But in this case, it does work, and I understand where you're coming from. I didn't think of that. I didn't see it that way. I mean, I certainly didn't consciously think about it. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, it's... I don't mind it. It doesn't bother me. I like it like that. I don't find it... Yeah.
Yeah, I don't either. I thought it was well done, and I guess maybe I was surprised at how effective it was, whereas normally I get taken out of a film if I see that kind of thing happen and get kind of frustrated by it or whatever. But in this case, it's just like, wow, that's powerful.
Well, it can make people anxious too, but yeah, definitely. I mean, Jerry... which is the actor's name as well. I can't remember his last name, but he only has one line in that scene. He's the guy in the civilian clothing, and he says,
"Yeah, the intelligence dude or whatever."
Yeah, the intelligence guy. And when the general says, or when Harrison Ford says, "Terminate the colonel's command," and the only line he says is, "with extreme prejudice."
Oh yeah.
That's like him looking right in the camera, and that was pretty intense.
Yeah, for sure. Between that and there's like a plantation scene where the lady breaks the fourth wall and stuff, or like looks in the camera, and it was really effectively used. Yeah,
it was, and I think that it definitely added layers of intensity to it. I didn't find it irritating in any way. I didn't really think about it, which is a good thing.
No, same.
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, I think typically you see those kinds of scenes, and it's more like an over the shoulder sort of shot.
Yeah. And they're looking just to the side of the camera kind of thing.
Right. Whereas this is like you said, it's like direct. Instead of like over the shoulder, it's like you are the camera.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is very interesting.
Well, to immediately contradict myself and jerk off about the deeper meaning of things, it wouldn't surprise me at all if the intention of putting you in Willard's skin from time to time is the same kind of thing as like trying to get you from the initial Willard as a drunk, cold-blooded killer to understanding him by the end of the film, just like Willard understands Kurtz by the end of the film, maybe. Like that's super meta, and it's definitely jerking off about the deeper meaning, but
I think you're right. Although I think it's hard to quantify. It's hard for me to put into words how I know Willard better. But I feel like I do, he's one of those characters, like he's a bit of a mystery. The narration definitely helps, but also the character arc and what he goes through and seeing how he deals with things is, also large in that. And I don't know where I'm going with this.
No, that's all right.
You know what I'm saying though? Like he is a bit of like, I don't know. He's almost sort of like, I mean, he's definitely you're into the story, right? Mm-hmm. It's like you're meant to be perceiving the story through his eyes,
or at least sympathizing with him throughout.
Right. Yeah. I think you're meant to be getting the story through him, obviously, as he's narrating it, but there's still something ineffable about him, even at the end of the movie, I think it's something that adds to the overall feel of the movie, just what it feels like, throughout the movie and by the end of it, there's just something there that there's some information there that you're not getting, I think, perhaps strategically, right? That's meant to sort of evoke a response.
Yeah, for sure. I think it really, for me, it ties back to what you were saying in the very beginning with the theme of the film, where I kind of feel like there's three layers. Upon viewing it last night, I kind of feel like there's three layers. Like the main meat, the foundation of the film is the journey up the river, regardless of setting, as you mentioned in the beginning. And I think that's like 100% like the major layer. And then there's the Vietnam War setting and psychedelic and anti-war around the time of the Vietnam War layer, which we've also touched on. And I didn't talk about it in the moment, but there was a third layer that hit me last night, which was Willard as the soldier addicted to war. And it really reminded me of that story I mentioned before with the vet that I had the fortune of befriending and talking about some of the stuff he went through, and then also really reminded me of The Hurt Locker. I'm not sure if you've seen that one, but Jeremy Renner is like a bomb tech in Iraq. Have you ever seen that one?
I know I've seen it, but it's
been a while.
It's been a while, yeah.
I haven't actually, unfortunately.
I mean, either way, it's just basically like, you know, the main character in The Hurt Locker is very much similar. He's a bomb tech who, you know, does tours and it's intense and then goes home. And there's an amazing scene in it where like he's just like walking up an aisle in a supermarket cereal aisle, and there's just like him walking dazed from behind, and there's just like 10,000 different choices of cereal, and it's like such a juxtaposition between the cereal aisle and like a fucking disarming an IED on the side of the road in
right.
Iraq or whatever. So I think, you know, Willard wanting to come back and getting shit-faced in Saigon and then getting this mission, it's like the soldier is addicted to war. And so I feel like, you know, what we were just talking about with Willard in general and like Willard's development throughout the series, or sorry, throughout the movie really echoes that for me. So you've got, you know, the soldier addicted to war and addicted to maybe not killing, but just addicted to the adrenaline, addicted to the shit showiness of it. You can sympathize in a way. Like you don't know what it's like to be in the war, but like you can see how it would be addictive just to be in these situations that you can't experience anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, you get the sensation that he is become sort of so used to that lifestyle that being back in the normal world is just too jarring for him, you know?
I don't know if addicted to war is the right word. I would say addicted to adrenaline before I said addicted to war. In Black Hawk Down, Eric Bana's character Hoot talks about it, and he says it's not about that. It's about the other guy and what you're doing for the other guy. It's not about being a war junkie. And then that speaks to the bond, you know, and that bond being tighter than family because, I mean, look what you're doing. You're protecting each other from death. You know, it's one of those psychological concepts where the bond happens in such a time of intensity, in such an intense place, that it's like you take the people out of that situation and it's like they have a very difficult time adjusting, you know, to Fruity Pebbles and Fruit Loops. Well, it's true. And,
oh, for sure.
You know, they get used to it too. That's the other thing. It's like you can get used to doing that. And yes, some people can enjoy it, but I think the people that enjoy it are like sociopaths. They're not right, you know, and they probably should not be in the military, but I think they get used. I think people do get used to it, and then they can't handle the real world. They can't handle Fruity Pebbles and Golden Grams and the 3 new unicorns in Lucky Charms.
Empty bowl, shout out.
Not to the empty bowl, shout out, right? Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the struggle. The other part of the struggle too is that the bond is tighter than family. It's like you get back to your family, and it's like you have not bonding with a family is different and in many ways more difficult than bonding with people like that. Because like when you're in a war type of situation, it's like everything goes out the window, man, and it's about you're in survival mode. So it's about helping the people around you and receiving help from them to achieve your objective or to survive. So
yeah, at least that's what it seems like from the outside.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Exactly. Wow, I'm so glad you said that. That's what it seems like on the outside because I've never been in it, so I can't really properly comment on that. I'm really glad you said that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's less the bond with the other soldiers for Willard because it's such a solo Heart of Darkness journey and more like he needs to be in the setting. I think if they made it about him being close with other soldiers, it would take away from the narrative of the Heart of Darkness thing. So I think you're right. I think it's the same. I think they're going for the same thing. They're just not touching on the camaraderie thing, but it's similarly addictive, I suppose, or similarly attractive.
Right. Yeah. And I guess, by the end of the film here, there's not many of them left, but he definitely at least takes the time to grab Lance and pull him out of there, on his way out. So I don't know, like it's kind of left unsaid, but you sort of get even initially when he goes into Kurtz's camp with Chef, like you kind of get the sense that like he's growing attached to these guys and that he cares about them. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the boat scene where he shoots the girl was one of the moments really that solidified him as part of the boat crew, even though he said they'll never think of him the same way. Like, I think to him, he felt closer to the guys after that through maybe sympathy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd forgotten that Brando cuts off Chef's head and chucks it in Wallace's lap, or Willard's lap, I mean. That was just like, oh shit, I totally forgot about that. And he's just freaking out, of course. And it was really quite a powerful thing.
Yeah, it's brutal, right? He just kind of like slips out of the night and he's got his face all painted up, and
yeah,
he goes around behind him and just like drops it.
Yeah. It'd be worth, touching maybe on a couple of the other psychedelic moments before going into the end. The only one I can think of that we haven't touched on was the Playboy Bunny thing, which I thought was really interesting. Like, I feel like the way that the journey happens on the boat, and it's a series of vignettes, like it's a series of short films almost, and it's episodic, was really, really quite cool. I like how it was like kind of disjointed and there's just random happenings and they're always so out there. I really enjoyed how fucked up all of it was, and it really kind of paints the war effort in a really crazy light. And then you layer in the narration where he's just like, while we're fucking sitting here partying and eating good food, Charlie's eating rat meat and getting stronger while we're getting weaker. Like, it was really powerful.
Yeah. It's so fucking surreal when they pull up, as they're approaching on the river, and it's like there's all these like crazy fucking lights, and it's just like, what, it's not what they tell you what's happening, and you're just like, what the fuck is this? And it's interesting the way that entire thing unfolds, and yes, it is very surreal, very dreamlike. And if I'm going to go back to my Homer's Odyssey comparison, it's almost sort of like the sirens. Like it's almost like it's like this weird sort of like it fits so well within the film, but I don't know if it had to be there. But it's an interesting distraction for the protagonists to get entangled in, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know whether to touch on the fact that the first time you said Homer's Odyssey, I thought you were making a Simpsons reference and then felt like a fucking idiot, or whether I want to comment on the genius of the comparison to the sirens from Homer, like proper Homer's Odyssey. Because I always associate the Odyssey when people talk about it as the Iliad in the Odyssey. So hearing Odyssey without the Iliad reference, I was just kind of like, is this a Simpsons reference? And then it was like, oh, Jesus, I'm dumb. That was the moment that I died on the podcast where I didn't actually say anything, because I was like, yeah, I'll definitely die if I say that.
It's brave of you to admit.
Hey, it's for the lols.
Oh man.
But I think that the Playboy Bunny scene is really interesting, because I feel like that entire scene would have failed probably completely if the end of the scene had been different. Like if it had just been like, and then they go and watch strippers, and then that's over. Instead of it being, and then they go and watch strippers, and then people jump across, and the strippers have to take off, and people hang on to the helicopter. Like, I really feel like the way that they brought that to a conclusion just like brought it all to a crescendo, and you really bought into it at that stage.
Yeah, and it's clearly there was a ton of preparation that went into like setting this up, and it's like the whole set and setting is really bizarre, right? It's like the stage is like more or less like on the water, and then there's sort of like an amphitheater that goes up from there, and there's like all these like crazy lights out in the water, And then like behind the soldiers,
there's like giant bullets on the
stage.
Yeah,
like there's like all those like giant bullets with like the lit up tips, and like it's just like it's really weird. It's this bizarre game show set or something, you know. And just the way the whole thing unfolds, like the helicopter lands and the guy comes out and everybody starts fucking booing, you know, and then like all the girls come out, and you know, like if it had ended any other way, you're right, it wouldn't have. It's like all this preparation was done, and there's this crazy set and setting for this thing, and really, it's like these guys get to see these girls for, you know, maybe, you know, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes tops, and then it just turns into fucking bedlam. And they have to bolt.
It makes sense, though. Like, I think, like, if it had just been like, oh, that was nice, we got to watch some strippers, it would have been shitty. But, like, the dudes, like, freak out, and they're, like, screaming obscenities at these girls, and these girls are just, like, half-assed. Like, they're dancing around having some fun or doing whatever, but they don't even take off their clothes, and these dudes just fucking lose it. And then there's, like, fist fights where one of them's like, don't talk about my girl like that. It's so interesting how it devolves into just, like you said, bedlam.
Yeah, it just turns into a shit show.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then they had the balls from a production standpoint to like hang stunt guys off the helicopter and like really like buy into that shit show, and it just makes it just encapsulates it so perfectly.
Yeah, it makes it all believable somehow. I mean, you know, I did half expect, like, you know, the dude in the leather jacket to be like, see, guys, this is why we can't have anything nice.
Yeah, exactly. But, exactly. It's just some dumb shit. But it's like, you know, the Kilgore scene is completely unbelievable, but you believe it because of how fantastically executed it is. And I feel like it's the same thing with the Playboy Bunnies. Like, it's a fucking masterpiece of cinema, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know anyone else besides maybe Terry Gilliam that can weave together absurd shit and make it coherent.
That's an interesting point to bring up, Terry Gilliam, because that style of, you know, surreal, trippy sort of filmmaking. Yeah.
You know, like Munchausen or even Brazil. Like Brazil has those surreal left turns, you know?
Fear and Loathing.
Yep. Fear and Loathing. Yep.
But yeah, I mean, Apocalypse Now almost strikes me as more of like, it's almost like a fantasy movie.
Yeah.
But in a real set and setting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, did you ever see Beasts of the Southern Wild?
Yes. Yeah. It didn't really hit me in a great spot at the time, but it was definitely fantastical.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, you know, you have what is essentially a sort of a fantasy movie set in something, you know, whatever it's something like New Orleans, you know.
No, it's a great comparison for sure. Yeah, for sure. And to touch on your Iliad and the Odyssey kind of thing, the Simpsons reference, the the Oh Brother Where Art Thou is another. Yeah, exactly. The Oh Brother Where Art Thou is another normal setting that has a fantastical journey in it. So like, I really do feel like you hit the nail on the head with the Odyssey thing.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I mean, I think Oh Brother We're Out There literally is the Odyssey.
Yeah, exactly.
Just in a different setting, but the story is the same. So yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if the source material for Apocalypse Now, which is Heart of Darkness, also lifts from the Odyssey. Like, it would make perfect sense.
Right. Or some other of, you know, Homer's poems, you know. Yeah. But the funny thing is, I didn't pick up on Oh Brother Where Art Thou. Like, I didn't get that at all until somebody like smacked me in the head with it. And then I was like, oh
yeah, yeah, totally.
So,
well, it's such a captivating film. We've got to do some Coen Brothers stuff at some point, man. Fuck, I love those guys.
Yeah, definitely. Some of my favorite movies.
But yeah, the bunny scene, man, like, I really, really loved the way it was handled. And then I think the bunny scene in Redux, where they like hang out with them in a helicopter and try and have sex with them and stuff, like, it was so off-putting. Not the content of the scene per se, but just it took what was a well-executed scene with the bunnies and then just added another scene in that I just didn't think was at all relevant. It was just like, we should have left it at these bunnies fly off and back to the normal shit show war instead of this like entire other thing.
Yeah, I mean, I want that to just kind of fly off and everybody's just like, kind of like, all right then.
Yeah. You know? And especially like it cuts to Willard. Like, there's people hanging off the helicopter and people jumping across the barbed wire, and Willard's just like sitting there with with like a newspaper wrapped around his free bottle of booze, just like sitting there watching the shit show and not caring at all. And I loved how he was just like, yeah, right on, something to watch.
Yeah,
because it's so his character, just sitting there letting the shit happen around him.
Right. It's hard to say what that means about Willard, but it totally informs his character. Like, you're like, yeah, that's so Willard,
Because you can see so many other people being like, oh, I need to try and help, or I need to try and do this, or I need to try and do that. And he's just like, I'm just going to drink my bourbon. Fucking whatever.
Yeah.
So we covered Lance surfing, Kilgore. We covered Lance on acid with the puppy and the roach dude shooting the grenade. The bunnies. I mean, I can't really think of any other... And the shooting of the boat. I can't really think of any of the other vignettes that really happened, other than the end with kind of Indiana Jones skulls on the shore shit show.
Yeah. I would like to just briefly mention the use of smoke and fog. And
what were those things? The colored smoke grenade things? What do they call those?
Colored smoke grenade things.
Yeah, well, isn't there like a fucking name for it or whatever? Like,
I know it's not a flare, but it's like a.
Well, I think they did say flare.
Something like that.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, totally, absolutely. The use of smoke and fog and whatnot is fantastic.
There's tons of it, and it's really well done. I guess since we're going there, since we're naturally we've touched on this a little bit, or we've made some touches with the end of the movie already, the final act, where we're talking about them, kind of rolling up and all those people on their little, paddle boats, like parting way for them to come through. And there's just like all this crazy colored smoke out in the woods that just sort of like, it has an interesting effect because it seems to make the green of the palm trees and all the plants like really pop in an interesting way.
Yeah, like kind of go orangey, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's like a live color version of like a Hawaiian shirt or something crazy like that.
A blood covered Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah. Never mind the dude that's naked from the waist down, hanging from a tree next to them, but
right. Yeah, the bodies just sprinkled throughout and heads, and it's like it's a well thought out set design based on like the objective being like, okay, I want you to design a set for a guy that's gone completely crazy and like killed a bunch of people. I was like, okay, perfect. It had that serial killer vibe going for sure.
Yeah.
But I feel like they sold it. Like they sold the serial killer vibe where it's like, you're not supposed to be creeped out by the serial killer vibe. You're supposed to end up like sympathizing with the brutality of the Viet Cong and Kurtz, in the sense that they were willing to do this crazy shit in order to get the job done. And like, that's why Kurtz turned the way he turned.
Sure. Yeah. And it's in that setting that Kurtz more or less spells that out for Willard. Yeah, and that whole set design is interesting. It seems to be sort of taking place in this old temple, like this abandoned temple, seemingly ancient and, like perhaps archaeological, except for it's wartime. They're in Cambodia at this point too, right?
Yeah.
So, it seems bizarre that that's the place they would end up, but at the same time, if it was just like a normal camp, like like tents and shit, that wouldn't I don't know, right? Like that, it wouldn't make
it wouldn't sell it.
Wouldn't sell it. Yeah.
Yeah. It just you would probably even think that it's not the end. Like, I think it helps really solidify visually to the viewer that the conclusion is going to happen. Yeah. In a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I really like too, like you said, they pull up on the camp, and it's all these indigenous people, which evidently, like, I was watching the credits last night, and it is actually a group of indigenous people from the Philippines. So they actually got actual indigenous people to come and shoot that scene. But it really just like, holy shit, that's such an amazing visual. And they like move through these paddle boats, and they get up to shore, and it's just like dozens of people on shore with bodies hanging from all the trees. And then Dennis Hopper's like, zap them with your siren, man, zap them, like it was such an interesting intro to that, because like you can imagine them not having Hopper say anything, and they just like roll up on shore just like, okay, but instead like you get this kind of Dennis Hopper strung out fucking druggy hippy dippy photographer dude,
hippy dippy photographer guy, yeah,
monologuing and stuff, and it really brings you into that scene in an interesting way, and you're like, okay, yeah, cool. He's got this crazy ass photographer dude that just fucking ad libs everything.
Yeah, I had somehow completely forgotten about Dennis Hopper.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, oh shit, Dennis Hopper, right,
and then he just doesn't shut up. You're just like, fuck, Jesus, man, calm down.
Yeah, spastic.
I think before we get into the climax of the film, I would love to just touch back on the smoke thing you were talking about a second ago, because we didn't really talk about Lance at all in the show, and his character. I mean, we did a little bit, but his character is such an interesting character, where he's like the pretty boy surfer, famous dude, and then he just goes from like famous surfer dude tanning himself like fucking a Ken doll on the bow to like psychedelic, covered in blood, gone native, crazy dude by the end of the film. And the smoke thing in particular, like the signal, was it a signal flare? I think that's what it's called, a signal
flare. Sure.
He pops a signal flare on the bow, doesn't he? Or is that Clean? And he's like dancing around with the signal flare, and then all of a sudden they get lit up and Clean gets shot.
No, it's Lance. He's like, yeah, purple haze, man.
Yeah, so he's like dancing around with the signal flare after they cross the bridge, and they get lit up, and that's where Clean... is that where Clean gets it, or is that where the captain gets it?
That's where Clean gets it. Yeah, they get lit up. Somebody opens up on them from the shore, and they like all kind of take cover and start firing back, and Clean hops up on the 60 and gets bit.
Just gets hit hard.
Yeah, that
was such a powerful scene too, because like the audio of it's like the purple haze thing and dancing around with the flare, and then like the audio of Clean's mom, being like, and now we're gonna do this, ha ha ha. Well, we love you very much, and he's just like dying on the deck. Like it's just like it's so well put together.
Yeah, the poor Clean doesn't even get to finish listening to so they're all opening their mail and shit, and like they're kind of like having a moment of peace, and like probably all pretty stoked to hear from people back in the world, and and he just poor Clean gets it right there.
Yeah, but fuckhead Lance lights up a goddamn signal flare. Like like I think. It's interesting throughout because, Clean gets nervous and blows up that boat. And then, he has his stupid moment. And then Lance has his stupid moment where he's, lighting up a signal flare, dancing around like an idiot, and gets Clean killed. Like it's interesting how the series of events, like fuck ups cause certain things. And it was such a powerful bit.
Right. Well, it's not like he shot like a signal flare. I'd think of as like, the thing you shoot out of the gun that like,
oh, that's true.
It's like a firework basically, like it like reports and like shoots off a thing in the sky. But I mean, they perhaps from the, woods could see the purple.
It would have drawn attention probably.
It would have drawn attention. Yeah, you're right. Like seeing that purple smoke, like, I mean, they definitely would have used those things as like indicators for, it's like in the Kilgore section, like they have like yellow smoke bombs on the beach that seem to like signify areas that they've like
they're like landing zones
taken. Yeah, exactly. Like So I think that's like the idea behind those things, but that there definitely would attract attention. But yeah, I mean Lance, right? He's fucking he's water skiing behind the PT boat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
At the beginning of the movie, and then by the end of the movie, he's like slaughtering a cow with the natives.
Yeah. Really sells the like how war can drive one crazy. Like you just picture him potentially surviving the war and just going on to being a batshit vet,
Yeah, something very strange happens to Lance. Like he reacts to it. He almost becomes sort of childlike, right?
Yeah.
Like his reaction to it is to like, I don't know, like this is like this weird childlike sort of behavior that he's putting out there.
Yeah, he reverts.
Yeah, he definitely reverts. It's definitely an interesting character evolution in the movie, I mean, as like literally the only other guy that survives. Like I'm definitely worried for him at the end of the movie. Like, man, is he going to be okay? Like, is he going to reintegrate? Is he not? I think he's going to reintegrate. He's going to be just fine.
Yeah, maybe. But his arc is less of an arc and more of a like arc off a cliff, like he just keeps going down in his arc,
Yeah.
He's like, oh wow, all right, dude. Like, especially when he potentially causes Clean to get killed. That's how I took it anyways. And then he's like, where's the puppy? Where's the dog? Instead of being like, oh shit, Clean's dead, He's like, wow.
Yeah, he seems to really go south when they do a checkpoint on that boat. Like,
yeah.
Once they get to that point, it's like that seems like where he really like. It's like he's on his way there, but once that scene happens, that's like where he just like drops right the fuck off.
Yeah, well, he ends up blasting a couple of those dudes, I guess. So it might be the first, people he's killed or whatever. But yeah, it's an interesting choice. The mixture of characters in the boat is super interesting.
I don't know if it's said as much, but it seems like he was pretty green. Like,
yeah,
like definitely his first tour, and like probably he had been there for less time than everybody else. Like, like maybe he had just got there like a little while before Willard shows up. So,
and then he goes native, like you said, and kills the buffalo or whatever. That was
well, I mean, at least he lived,
That's
which
it.
is more than can be said for any of the other boat crew.
Yeah, poor chef, man. And the spear killing the other captain. Fuck yeah, there's so much to it. The that ending kind of, I wouldn't even call it the third act necessarily, because the third act's quite a bit larger, but just the final scenes with Brando, which we've touched on and whatnot, but like the Brando stuff really blew me away. Like, especially like the fact that he's always in shadow and you can barely see him. Like, I guess I get that it was to cover up the fact that he was a fatty, and like that's fine, but the accidental result of him showing up that way and having to have him, in shadow all the time, it really, to me, was so much more powerful. And all of the like ad-libbing he was doing, while I guess was super frustrating at the time, because they were like, just say your fucking lines, dude. And he's like, I'm a snail slithering. And they're like, dude, just say your fucking lines. Like, I loved it. I absolutely fucking loved it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm aware of the production issues with Brando, but I think I said it before, he really makes an impression in this movie. And even I think it all works, like you said, the fact that he's like always half in shadow. I think his performance really works, even though he's like ad-libbing and he's like kind of a woof. Like it really works. Like the stories that he's telling are kind of like, they're like out of left field and just like kind of jarring, and like you're not really sure where he's coming from or where he's going. I think that just works for the character, though. It makes,
for sure, it fits perfectly.
Yeah,
and that story that he tells about cutting off all the children's arms, the VCs cutting off all the polio vaccine arms, like it's just like, it really makes it crystal clear how he got to be as vicious as he did and why. And, he's like, if I had 10 divisions of those people, this war would be over. And it really captures the failings of the war based on, we talked in the other episode about the Vietnam War Ken Burns documentary. And watching that, it became so clear how much the lack of political will in the States just really just guaranteed failure, even though I sympathize and agree with the protesting. Like, it was such an interesting take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Kurtz is this character where, I think some people are able to hold it together in those kinds of situations, and the darkness doesn't get inside them. But I think the only way that Kurtz could continue on was to, I think he even says as such, as, he had to make friends with the horror. And, I don't know if that's clearly not the way that it works for everyone, but for him, for his personality, that's the way that it worked. And, it's everything that unfolded after that. And that is the reason that, this entire journey happened. But he's a character that he's kind of terrifying, but at the same time, he's vulnerable. He's vulnerable in a lot of ways. And in some ways you can identify with, like, the pain that he's the pain that he's gone through and the effect that it's had on him, like he's the way he is for a reason.
Yeah. And I definitely also felt like you sympathize with his belief, you don't sympathize with his beliefs in the sense that you don't sympathize with what he believes in, but you sympathize with the fact that he has belief in his opinions. And I found that was really hammered home by the fact that he's like, I want you to go and tell my son everything because I'm not ashamed of everything I've done. Like,
right.
It's interesting how much commitment he has to the beliefs, even if you may not agree with them.
He kind of sells it to you, right? I mean, he crystallizes how he came to his conclusions.
And you believe, I buy it. I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
It seems quite logical. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though it's completely fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. He's an interesting character. And I think, regardless, however it came together, I don't know if it was, I mean, it had to be a little bit of everything, right? I mean, it had to be Brando somewhat, and, wherever he fell short, then it had to be Coppola's filmmaking. But regardless, the stew that became Kurtz on screen is quite a potent stew.
For sure, man. And I think this is the worst possible analogy, but they made lemonade out of lemons, dude. It sounds like it was a shit show of a production, but man, did they make some fucking tasty lemonade. They
made some delicious lemonade.
Unfortunately, the lemonade was garnished with a head on a spike, but it was still tasty.
Yeah, it was, it adds something to it.
That's it. I'm definitely taking the analogy too far. The conclusion
it's a pink lemonade.
It's definitely some pink, and it's you know why it's pink too. The end scene it's been, since 2001, probably since I've seen the movie. So it's been a good 15 plus years. So I remembered a lot of it, but it was still quite hazy. And I was quite struck last night by the scene where Willard walks out of the killing room in front of the crowd, and the crowd kneels before him. I was quite struck with how powerful that was viewing it last night.
Yeah.
And how tempting it would have been for Willard to take Kurtz's place.
I think it was the first time, I've watched this film, and it occurred to me that he must have been worried the entire time that might be an eventuality, that might be something that he would have to face up to, and overcome, like that temptation. I hadn't quite, like that was something that he was dreading through the entire journey that you weren't necessarily privy to until you see him walk out of the temple with the, machete or whatever it is.
It's so powerful that they all bow down too. Like just the power that you can step into. And I think it, like you said, you don't pick it up necessarily, but it's hinted at, like there's the officer that went up before him that joins forces with Kurtz, which I didn't realize it at the time, but he's like a major actor, man. Scott Glenn, he was like the captain in The Hunt for Red October, and he's in Silence of the Lambs and stuff, and he doesn't even have a fucking line in this movie. He just stands there with his shirt off, like
yeah.
But it hints at it. It hints that he might go and just join up.
Yeah, it's a powerful scene because he throws his weapon down and just proceeds towards the crowd, and everybody starts standing up, and everybody starts dropping their weapons, like. And he just goes and grabs Lance, and they get out of there, man. It's like...
Yeah, and it fade to black. Like, they don't talk. It doesn't really go, A movie nowadays would be like, the next scene would be them going home. And you know what I mean? Like, I just love how it's like, that's it.
Right, yeah. There'd be like one last little narration bit from...
Yeah, something. Something to just punch you in the face with the obviousness of something, for sure.
Yeah, it'd be way too... This film, if there's anything it didn't need, was to be wrapped up nice and tightly with a ribbon. Like, that would just be so bad. Like, oh God.
For sure. Did your viewing conclude with Kurtz's army village being blown up or not?
It did not conclude with that. No.
Okay, because like last night, the film critic guy was saying that's how it was supposed to end, and he thought that the people in the movie theater turned the movie off too soon. Like he thought it was like a post-credit scene or something, which didn't make any sense to me. But he might have been referring to a different cut or a deleted scene, because he said that the Philippine government made sure that the sets were destroyed after the film, and they did it by actually bombing the sets.
Oh, wow.
And they filmed it, and it was like magnificent pyrotechnics. Because I guess like the actual military actually bombed it as opposed to it being pyro. So
Oh, fuck.
I was curious if it was in your viewing of it, because he confused me with saying that it should have been. And I was like, I don't know. I prefer it fading to black and not being clear whether or not he calls in the airstrike.
No, I think the last thing that happens is the guy on the other end of the radio is still like trying to get confirmation. And Martin Sheen just shuts the radio off and they take off.
Yeah, which I thought was perfect. It was just a perfect way to wrap it up.
Yeah, it was like, we're done here. You know?
Yeah. No more beats need to be had. That was perfectly. There are enough beats. I feel beaten.
We're done here. We're going home. You know, there's some more like composite sort of, I'm trying to remember what the exact word for it is, but composite picture on picture sort of stuff going on where like
double exposure stuff.
Double exposure stuff, right? And you have like sort of a close up of Marty Sheen's face, and then like,
oh yeah,
the temple in the background and all that sort of stuff,
and their eyes overlap.
Right.
Yeah. That was fucking awesome.
Whatever that means. But I was like, I'm over the double exposure stuff here at this point.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
That's how it struck me. But
at the same time, like this is late 70s. Like double exposure was definitely the way to go back then. So it's used up nowadays, but you can forgive it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think the double exposure thing annoys me because when I was a kid, my mother always made me get the, you get like school pictures.
Oh yeah.
My mother would always get like, the weird one where it's like a black background and your face, and they get a front shot of you. And then like up to the like right hand corner, there's like a weird little vignette with your profile, with your like side profile.
Oh yeah, it's so bad.
And I hated that. My mother always wanted to get that one.
I love it. I love that. Like at the end of this climactic horror show, you have a flashback of like a family portrait. I love it.
Yeah, I've made it personal.
That's a perfect segue, actually, into a really funny little anecdote from this. Like, towards the end of the film, I was sitting in the theater with all these people, and I was thinking to myself, like, man, I'd really like to just sit for like 60 seconds after the movie's over and not have someone get up and start talking about it, just so I can like think a little bit about it.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, that's a ridiculous thing to A, request, or B, receive, but it didn't even dawn on me that like I would get that moment when the credits rolled, because the credits are a couple minutes long, So I'm sitting there as the credits roll, just kind of like really trying to let everything sink in, and this dude next to me has been checking his phone every hour throughout the movie, presumably just to check the time, but it's quite a bright screen, And so he flicks on his screen 10 seconds into the credits where I'm trying to like settle in, and checks the time or whatever. And then he flicks on his screen again, and I look over, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? And he's checking out his Bumble dating app on his phone. And he's like a 65-year-old dude in like a fucking cardigan sweater with like a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, like checking to see if some chick wants to fuck him after watching like a brutal murder via machete. And I just thought it was the funniest goddamn thing. So just take a moment, dude. Man. Just take a moment. Don't worry about who wants to bang you at this moment. Just take a moment. You just watched a cow get slaughtered with a machete, dude.
Yeah, just just take a moment to soak that in.
You can get your dopamine hit later. Just chill.
Yeah. Well, it's there you go. The dopamine hit. It's a testament to the power of that shit.
That's it. And on that bumbling note, let's rate this motherfucker.
Yeah, let's rate this bitch.
Well, this movie, it sounds so hackneyed to say it, but, this movie is an epic masterpiece of cinema. It's a true piece of art, and Coppola and, that whole gang, Milius, Lucas, Spielberg, like, they were all about film as art, especially Coppola, and that's exactly what it is. I mean, it's been said a million times, but, the movie won Best Cinematography, the Academy Award for Best Cinematography, for a reason. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at. And when you know, especially when you watch it today on these crisp, crystal clear screens, phone, laptop, TV, whatever, it looks amazing. But it's not just that. It's the music, the acting, the writing. Everything is great about it, you know, and I don't mind the length. I've never minded long movies, especially if they're good and the content's great. So I'm going to give it a 9.5. Yep, you heard it here from Mulvey.
Bada bing. Perfect.
Bada boom.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, do you want to go next or do you want me to go next? I don't really mind.
Sure, I'll do it, man. I do not have the fantastic algorithm that you have going on that pits every movie versus every movie. But I'm going to go ahead and say it, man. I think out of all time, this has to be one of the top 10 movies ever for me.
Yep.
You know, so it's got to be at least a 9.5, I would say. Absolutely. And there's no doubt about my mind in that. Like, that is for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree and echo both of your guys' ratings. The algorithm is an interesting beast. So yeah, it's all films of all time in a list, no categories. I checked before revisiting the ratings, and it was like, I think number 30 all time on my list.
Yeah.
But last night when I was watching it, man, I know this is controversial, but hey, fuck it, I don't care. I'm a jerk. I prefer Apocalypse Now to the Godfather movies. I think it's better.
Oh, me too.
And, you know, I think the main reason that I feel that way is because, as I mentioned before, like with war movies, it was my first exposure to the Vietnam era in cinema. It was also my first exposure to Coppola. I think I saw Apocalypse Now before I watched The Godfather, you know, because I probably saw Apocalypse Now when I was like 15 or something, and was more obsessed with war than I was with the mafioso stuff. So it being the first Coppola movie, like, you know, it's a goddamn masterpiece of a film. And, you know, if he had never made the Godfather movies, there's no doubt that he would be renowned for this, you know, like it's that caliber of film.
You know what? I think you might be right. I think it may be better than Godfather. I saw this movie before Godfather as well, and I certainly liked it a lot more than Godfather. Now, that might have been the fact that I was a kid and the Godfather was kind of boring, you know, because it was slow and it plodded along and, you know, I don't know. But watching it as an adult and having watched The Godfather recently as an adult, I mean, yeah, they're great movies, but I guess if I'm being honest, I like this one better.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And by that rationale, I needed to move Apocalypse Now to now be better than The Godfather on my list. And Godfather and Godfather Part 2 were both in the top 10. So this one really climbed the ranks for me and ended up as of last night as number 4 all time.
Whoa, nice.
It gets beaten by Empire Strikes Back for me, which is more of a nostalgia thing, I think, than a cinematic masterpiece thing. Like, I love Empire, don't get me wrong, but
yeah, it's the nerd in you, you know.
It is. It's the nerd in me. You could totally argue that Apocalypse Now is better than Empire, and I would completely buy it. But for me, Empire is the nerd in me. And it beats out The Professional and Lebowski and Cinema Paradiso and Blade Runner, kind of the movies in that range.
Right. I mean, I don't know if Apocalypse Now is in my top. It's definitely not my top 5. Probably in my top 10, maybe. Your algorithm is like just some like quantum level God particle shit. That's all I'm going to say.
It really blew me away last night and really elevated up to number 4. And my rankings are such that 9.5 is the highest ranking I've ever given a movie. And it is a 9.5. It is one of 7 9.5s on my list of 300 odd movies.
Nice.
So we all had identical ratings.
That's a rarity.
Like identical to the decimal point. Identical
to the decimal point. Yeah, that's a rarity, but I had a feeling it was going to sort of pan out that way.
It's a fucking good movie
for us, because it's just it really is. You know, I mean, the Godfather movies are terrific, but I'm only so into mobster movies, you know. Whereas the style of movie that Apocalypse Now is way more up my alley. Yeah,
I'm with you.
Like I said, to me, it's almost Apocalypse Now is almost laid out like a fantasy movie, you know, in every way except for the fact that it takes place in a real scenario, in a real situation. So that's way more up my alley than, you know, dudes shooting each other with Tommy guns and, you know. Yeah.
But the more I watch The Godfather, because I've only seen it a handful of times, the more I watch it, the more I love it. Like, it's fucking great.
Yeah.
But watching this last night, man, I can't deny that I prefer it.
Yeah. It is terrific. I took it in 2 doses today. I watched like the first half of it, and then it was just a nice day, and I felt really guilty for sitting in the dark watching a movie. So I like took my bike out and rode around on some trails for a couple hours, and then came back home and finished it. And it was actually great doing it that way because, like you said, I had a little space to like think about the first part of it and just think about the movie in general. And you know, it's not like I didn't know what was coming, but like, you know, sometimes it's interesting to kind of pause in the middle of something and like psych yourself, like think about the first half and psych yourself up for the second half. So it was really it was a hell of an enjoyable experience watching that today. And yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, folks, watch it. There's nothing wrong with pausing something. Like, I definitely prefer for the first time to watch something all the way through, but I'm all about pausing things like when you've seen it 100 times. By all means.
I've seen it a bunch of times. Yeah. You know, so, you know, this is probably my 20th viewing or, you know, 20 something viewing, you know, and I think the first time I saw it, like, I didn't really get it, you know, I was pretty young the first time I saw it and I was just like,
same.
Like I got the imagery and I got that they were, you know, in war and all that stuff, but like the nuances of the story were completely lost on me. So
yeah, same. I was just a dumb teenage punk.
Yeah,
who was more like stoked about the acid and the weed smoking and the psychedelics of it all.
Exactly.
I think the last thing I'll mention, which I think I said throughout, is in the beginning, I should say, is the theatrical cut is definitely my favorite by far. The final cut I enjoyed it, you know, like I just have no personal time for the plantation scene, and like I just love the original cut of it, and I would prefer just to kind of leave it at that.
Yeah. See, the thing is, the movie, it's well paced, but it definitely takes its time getting through things. And I think if you like just taking one more little sidetrack away from getting them to the end of the climax of the story, really fucks it up. You know? Especially if you're used to seeing it a certain way. Like if they had made it the other way, I don't know if I would object to it so much. But
no, probably not. No, you're right. Yeah, dead right.
But you know, just the way I'm used to seeing it is, I think, perfect.
Yeah, as we spoke about in many other shows, it's the George Lucas Star Wars "don't fix it if it ain't broke" thing. You know, leave it alone. I like it the way it is. Thank you very much.
God damn it. Amen.
God damn.
Amen. Well, cool, man.
I just want to say from the deep down heart of Mulvey, good chat, boys. Thanks so much. And thanks so much to all you folks at home for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Later, everyone.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be talking about The Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix. You can find the show notes for today's episode in your podcast app of choice or at our website, ebd.fm/episodes/23. You can shoot us questions by using the Twitter hashtag AskEBD. You can find me at Mulverine on Twitter, that's MOHLVERINE. Chad is at Chad Normal on Twitter. Ben is at Jarhigo on Twitter, that's JARHEEGO. I'd like to take a minute and thank you so much for tuning into the show. It really means a lot to me and the boys. If you'd like to support the show, there are 2 great ways to do it. First, you can rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, apps, things. Or you can tell someone to check out the show. Word of mouth is incredibly powerful, and it sure does mean a lot to me and the boys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.